He was the last of Britain's real tough guys, a man who played both Britain and America like pieces on a chessboard. Born into a family so rich they could challenge entire nations, he chose to disappear into Africa for a decade. Everyone thought he was dead, but just when the world had moved on, chaos erupted. He came back, and he wasn't just back for nostalgia. He was here for what his father left behind, an inheritance that could tip the scales in a war between Britain and America. After cutting ties with the church, Tom tracked down his father's lawyer, Joseph. That's when he found out what he had inherited, a patch of land called Nuca Sound. It wasn't just any piece of land. Everyone wanted it. At his father's funeral, Tom did something strange. He muttered words in a foreign tongue and smeared some unknown powder on his face. His odd behavior caught the eye of a stunning woman standing nearby. Turns out, she was his half-sister. Up until the day before, she had been seen as the rightful heir to their father's fortune. Her husband had even struck a deal with the powerful East India Company. But British law was clear. If there was a son, he had the first claim. With Tom's unexpected return, that deal was instantly worthless. His comeback sent ripples through powerful circles. They dug into his past decade and came to a disturbing, almost supernatural conclusion. The whispers began, dark, eerie, and almost certainly false. That night, Tom walked into his father's old house and was greeted by the only person he could still trust, the family's longtime servant. "This place is cursed," Tom muttered, "and I've promised to do something really foolish." The next day, he headed to his father's old office. But as he reached for the door, a woman stepped in his way. She had been running a brothel out of the place since his father passed. When she realized Tom planned to take it back, she wasn't pleased. "I've got girls," she said with a smirk, "but I've got men too. They're killers at heart." "If I had any sense," Tom replied, "I wouldn't be here." Later, the East India Company summoned Tom for a meeting. There, he met Stuart, their head of global affairs. Stuart wasted no time. He wanted to buy Nuca Sound. Tom wasted no words. His answer was no. Frustrated, Stuart snapped. "Why don't you just open the damn envelope?" he shouted. Tom smirked and walked away. Determined to uncover the truth, Tom hired grave diggers to exhume his father's body. He then called in a doctor specializing in anatomy to examine it. What no one knew was that Tom's time in Africa had changed him in ways they couldn't imagine. He had endured unspeakable horrors, and in return, he had gained knowledge of ancient, forbidden rituals. "You're not really here," he whispered to himself. "So don't just stand there. I have work to do." The doctor completed his work and confirmed Tom's worst fear. His father hadn't died of natural causes. He had been poisoned, massively and quickly. Tom handed the doctor 3 silver coins and gave him a chilling warning. "Rebury him," Tom said. "If this body ends up anywhere else, I'll find you, and I'll kill you. I know things about death." With that out of the way, Tom's next move was settling his father's debts. £215 and 17 shillings, he announced. "Line up in an orderly fashion." Just then, a striking woman approached him. She introduced herself as his father's widow, his stepmother, though he had never met her before. She even had documents proving the marriage was real. The lawyer, Joseph, quickly pulled her into his office to verify the papers. If her claim was valid, she would be entitled to half of everything. News traveled fast, and the East India Company, desperate to regain control, saw this as a golden opportunity. Their hopes soared when word came from Dublin. The marriage was legal. "Well done," one of them sneered. "An actress saves the mighty East India Company." But the woman still had to go through the courts, and her odds weren't great. The next morning, Tom discovered something had gone missing, his white horse. The thief had even left his name behind, as if mocking him. Tom knew that name well. Atticus. Then, as if on cue, Atticus himself showed up. He was London's most feared executioner. If the price was right, he'd kill anyone. "Someone paid to have your father taken out," Atticus told Tom. Realizing Atticus could be useful, Tom made him an offer. And just like that, 2 dangerous men became allies. That night, Tom noticed someone trailing him, a little girl. She had overheard that a man named Silver Fong planned to kill him. She led Tom to the ship where Silver Fong was supposed to be. Tom, not wanting to alert anyone, anchored his boat far away and swam to the ship. But when he climbed aboard, Silver Fong was nowhere to be found. Tom didn't leave empty-handed, though. He drenched the ship in gasoline and set it ablaze. By the time he returned to his boat, the girl had vanished. The next day, he visited Hagar, the brothel owner, fishing for information. Hagar denied knowing Silver Fong's whereabouts, but revealed who he worked for. Following her lead, Tom met Dr. Barton, a surgeon who carried himself with an air of knowing too much. But Tom knew Barton's secret too. He was an American spy. "What do you want?" Barton asked. "I want a direct line to the President of the United States," Tom replied. Barton wasn't impressed. He pulled out a double-barrel shotgun, forcing Tom to back off. On his way home, a man tried to ambush Tom, but Tom saw right through it. The man, desperate, turned on a woman, threatening her, thinking she was connected to the land dispute. "The deal's still open," the man sneered, waving a contract. "I've been told to wait for a better offer," she replied coolly. Meanwhile, news spread that a body had washed up on the shore, Silver Fawn. Tom had made his point loud and clear. To drive the message home, he cut out Silver Fawn's heart and left it as a warning for anyone else thinking of coming after him. But the danger wasn't over. Tom woke up in Barton's care, having barely survived another assassination attempt. Barton saw an opportunity. If Tom was weak, maybe he'd finally sell Nuca Sound to America. But Tom still refused. When threats failed, Barton tried a different approach. "What do you want?" Barton asked again. "Tell President Callow that I want a monopoly," Tom said. Barton shook his head. "You should have led with that." Back home, Tom licked his wounds. He now realized every faction, Britain, America, the East India Company, was growing desperate. He made his move, sending a letter to the British royal family, offering them the land. Meanwhile, the East India Company received an unsettling document from Tom's lawyer. It was Tom's will. If he died, the land would go straight to America. "Our top priority now," one of them muttered, "is keeping that bastard alive." Not long after, a familiar face showed up at Tom's doorstep, his father's widow. Her court battle had succeeded, and now she legally owned half of the estate. And just like that, she moved in. Tom had no choice but to let her stay. Later that night, as Tom's stepmother was getting ready to head back to the old house after a show, she was approached by a woman claiming to be a fan. The woman flattered her and insisted on taking her to meet someone who admired her greatly. Feeling intrigued but cautious, she agreed. It wasn't long before she realized she'd walked into a trap. The so-called admirer was actually a powerful duke, and they were now heading straight to his estate. The carriage came to a sudden stop, and before she could react, strong hands grabbed her, dragging her inside the mansion. There, she stood face to face with the rotund duke, who eyed her like a prize. "You'll wear this for me tonight," he said smugly, holding out a delicate yet revealing dress. She kept her composure and raised an eyebrow. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "There's no mistake," the duke chuckled. "I'm the Duke of Richmond, and what I want, I get." Tom saw this move for exactly what it was, a calculated play by the royal family. They planned to use his stepmother's imprisonment as leverage to force her into giving up her stake in Nuca Sound. And sure enough, the next morning, the king's guards stormed into the house to take her away. "You have to hold on," Tom told her, gripping her arms. "Look at me. I'll make sure the East India Company gets involved. They'll help you." So, she was led away, but Tom had a plan in mind. As he expected, just as she was about to be forced into surrendering her claim, agents from the East India Company arrived. They weren't about to let the royal family cut them out of the deal. Using the situation to his advantage, Tom orchestrated her escape. This was her wake-up call. She finally realized that her best chance of survival lay in teaming up with Tom rather than fighting him for control of the port. So, instead of continuing their battle, she chose to align with him, and together, they prepared to face whatever forces came next. That night, Tom and his stepmother attended a grand ball, where he crossed paths with his half-sister and her husband. The husband was still bitter about losing his wife's inheritance to Tom. Fueled by resentment, he lashed out, only for Tom to effortlessly grab him by the collar and lift him off the ground as if he were a child. Humiliated, the man decided to reclaim some dignity. "I challenged James Delaney to a duel. To the death." Tom simply smirked. "Seems like my life is worth more than yours." Meanwhile, Tom was also busy looking for ways to make money. He learned that selling gunpowder on the black market was a highly profitable business. Wasting no time, he found a chemist named George and threw a handful of silver coins at him. "Work for me," Tom ordered. George, never having seen so much money before, agreed without hesitation. Together, they made their way to a secluded farm where the gunpowder production would take place. George, being the eccentric type, went to work immediately, sniffing cow dung, chewing pigeon droppings, and calculating the materials they'd need. One critical ingredient was 200 liters of urine. The hardest part, though, was securing saltpeter, which was strictly controlled by the royal family. The only stockpile left belonged to the East India Company, and getting their hands on it would be nearly impossible. After setting George to work, Tom prepared to return to town. However, something was off. His normally obedient white horse refused to move. Sensing danger, Tom cautiously advanced. Out of nowhere, a towering man lunged at him, delivering a crushing kick to his ribs. A brutal fight broke out, and despite Tom's skill, he found himself overpowered. The following day, bruised but undeterred, Tom visited Hagar, the madam of the brothel. He needed urine for the gunpowder, and she had plenty of girls who could provide it. Bring them to the farm, he told her, and make sure they drink plenty of water. Next, he sought out Atticus. I've got a job, he said. A robbery. That night, Hagar's girls executed the first phase of the plan. One of them flirted her way into the warehouse, while another quietly locked the security guards inside their break room. With the distraction in place, Atticus and the others crept into the courtyard, moving carefully toward the warehouse where the saltpeter was stored. They moved quickly, lifting the containers and slipping away into the night. By the next morning, the East India Company was in chaos. They knew only one man in London was bold enough to pull off such a stunt: James Delaney. Furious, they placed a bounty on his head, offering a hefty sum to anyone who could capture or kill him. Not long after, the first would-be bounty hunter found Tom. He followed him into the wilderness, but just when he thought he had Tom cornered, Tom struck first. He severed the man's artery and walked away, leaving a message for anyone else considering betrayal. To ensure no one in his inner circle turned on him, Tom made it clear he knew exactly who might sell him out. I know which one of you it is, he announced, and I'll make sure he's of no use to anyone. He then visited Hagar's brothel, tossing half a severed thumb onto the table as a warning. But he also pulled out a gleaming diamond. Your choice, he told them. Loyalty or greed? Despite his warning, some were still tempted by the bounty, willing to risk their lives for a payday. With tensions between Britain and America rising, gunpowder became the most valuable commodity. Both sides wanted it, and Tom was one of the few who could produce it. Before long, American spy Barton approached him. We've got enough gunpowder to last 10 days, Barton said. After that, we're done. Tom knew what he was asking. If he supplied the Americans, it would be treason. Just as he was about to refuse, Barton revealed something chilling. He knew exactly where Tom's secret factory was. His people had already infiltrated Tom's operation. If Barton decided to inform the British, Tom would be executed without a second thought. Realizing he had no choice, Tom agreed to the deal. However, he insisted the gunpowder be ready in 8 days. He then went to George and explained the urgency. The chemist warned him that such rapid production would require chloride, but that introduced another problem. Chloride gunpowder had to be stirred constantly and carefully. The slightest mistake could trigger an explosion. Still, they pressed on. Tom brought in workers, rotating shifts to ensure non-stop stirring. It was a risky operation, but by the deadline, the first batch of gunpowder was ready. To smuggle the gunpowder out of London, Barton came up with a clever distraction. He spread a rumor about a cholera outbreak, throwing the city into panic. That night, a convoy carrying 50 tons of gunpowder rolled toward the city gates. When the guards stopped them for an inspection, Tom played along. Careful, he warned. Those carts are full of cholera-infected corpses. The guards hesitated. Out, one of them ordered. Tom stepped down. He had a plan for every scenario. Outside the gates, Barton was waiting. As the shipment was successfully handed over, Tom leaned in close and warned, if my factory is discovered, I'll know exactly who to come for. Early the next morning, the East India Company headquarters was in chaos. A shocking revelation had just come in. Tom had been betrayed. The owner of the farm, hoping to cash in on the bounty, had ratted him out for supplying gunpowder to the Americans. We have Delaney's factory, one of the officers declared, unaware that a nervous secretary named Fraga had overheard everything. As soon as he finished work, Fraga rushed straight to Tom and spilled the whole story. I'll handle it, Tom said firmly. Go home. Wasting no time, Tom made his way to his factory. Get everything out now, he ordered. But George, his chemist, hesitated. The gunpowder's unstable. Moving it too soon could cause an explosion. Doesn't matter, Tom snapped. We've been sold out. We're leaving. No arguments. Meanwhile, in a small city church, a priest was hearing his first confession of the day. At that exact moment, Tom was already moving his stash via the river, avoiding the roads where the East India Company would be waiting. As expected, their men arrived at the factory only to find it empty. Furious, they lashed out in revenge. blowing up Tom's only ship, which was under Atticus's watch. Later that night, Tom confronted Atticus. "You were supposed to guard it," he growled. "They hit fast. We barely had time to react." Annoyed, Tom left and wandered down to the river, needing to clear his head. Winter, Hagar's daughter, found him there and handed him a bottle of wine. "Drink," she said. He did and soon passed out, completely out cold until morning. When he woke, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Winter was dead. Her body lay still as mourners gathered to pray. Tom didn't go near her. He already knew what this meant. Hagar would blame him. Whether he was guilty or not didn't matter. Sure enough, by the next day, Hagar had gone straight to the East India Company and spilled everything. Tom's entire operation, his American connections, all of it. "Treason," the officials bellowed. "High treason." They wasted no time in sending special forces to hunt him down. Frago once again ran to warn Tom, but Tom had already braced himself for what was coming. He walked into a dimly lit tavern, leaned toward an actor sitting in the corner, and whispered, quickly, very quietly. Before he could act on his plans, however, the royal guards arrived. They arrested him on the spot. Under British law, a person convicted of treason lost everything. His properties, his businesses, Nuca Sound would become the crown's. To get Tom to confess, they tortured him relentlessly, keeping a doctor nearby to make sure he didn't die too soon. But no matter how much pain they inflicted, Tom held out. If he confessed, he'd be as good as dead. Finally, Tom demanded to see Stewart, the head of the East India Company. "After I speak to him," Tom promised, "I'll confess." Intrigued by his resilience, they agreed. When Stewart arrived, Tom dropped his final card on the table. "Drop the charges," he said through gritted teeth, "and release Hagar. Also, I want a ship." Stewart scoffed. "And why would I do that?" "Because I know about your past," Tom said coldly. "The illegal slave trade. That shipwreck. Over 100 slaves dead. I was the only survivor. If people find out, the East India Company will burn." Stewart stared at him, weighing the consequences. "You have 4 hours," Tom warned. Back at the East India Company, Stewart had no choice but to comply. Hagar was released, along with her companion, and they were handed over to Atticus. But in exchange for his favor, Atticus made sure neither of them lived long enough to be a problem. With that loose end tied up, Stewart rescinded the charges against Tom, allowing him to walk free. But there was still one problem. Tom needed safe passage out of England. Barton, the American contact, held the key, but he wasn't making it easy. "Nuca Sound," he demanded. "Give it to me, and you'll get your safe passage." Tom's eyes narrowed. "You're not just an American spy, are you?" Barton smirked. "I work for the East India Company too. A double agent." Tom sighed. "Of course." Barton's career ended that night, permanently. Tom's people made their final preparations. The supplies were ready. Now, all they needed was the East India Company's promised ship. A courier arrived with Tom's passage papers, but just as things seemed to be falling into place, another problem arose. The royal regent had officially sentenced Tom to death, but Tom had been expecting this. He had his people lying in wait, armed and ready. The moment the king's special forces arrived at the docks, chaos erupted. Explosions shook the harbor as Tom and his crew fought their way through the city's gates, battling the oncoming waves of soldiers. Everyone, from seasoned fighters to ordinary townsfolk, took up arms. Even George, who had never so much as thrown a punch in his life, fought with everything he had. Tom, Atticus, and George raced toward the ship, but the guards had blocked the only way aboard. Just as it seemed they were trapped, the ship suddenly began to move. Their allies had taken matters into their own hands, ensuring they wouldn't be left behind. Meanwhile, Stewart received a mysterious package with Barton's name on it. Believing he had won, he eagerly opened it, only to realize too late that he had underestimated Tom Delaney. As the ship left the harbor, Tom turned to his crew. "America first," he said, then on to Dillard, in the Auroras. One of his men frowned. "I thought the gunpowder was for the Americans?" Tom smirked. "We are Americans,